Alright, so in the interest of trying to get our information covered in the last 3 weeks, we need to cover some things outside of class as well as inside of class and do it a little bit more smartly. So with the Vietnam War, we're going to do just that. I'm going to give you the basics, we're going to drill down into some more of the specifics in class. So the Vietnam War, 1959-1975, the start and the end dates are kind of hazy, and we'll mention why. But the big thing about this, the Vietnam War is part of the Cold War. We're trying to prevent communist takeover in Vietnam. Now we got to back up a little bit. We got to go to at least the 1940s. Now Vietnam is going to be a colony of France, right? So all those European nations have cut up Africa and Asia into their bits and pieces, and Vietnam is French, right? So they've colonized Vietnam. Now that's all well and good, but the big thing that happens in the 1940s is that the Japanese invade. So what's one of the things that the mother country is supposed to do for the colony is to protect them and to prevent an invasion from an outside force. They can't, because France has just been destroyed by Germany. So that link between the colony and the mother country, which was never strong to begin with, has now pretty much been completely severed. So the Vietnamese are left to their own devices and to the help of the United States when we can, to push back the Japanese. So finally in 1945, Ho Chi Minh's going to get the Japanese, or the Japanese are going to surrender. They're going to leave Vietnam. Now Ho Chi Minh was a general in the Vietnamese army, the resistance. The problem for him is he's declaring Vietnam free, right? Because that relationship between mother country and colony is gone now. The problem though is the people making the decisions, the big three, the United States, France, and not France, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union want to stabilize the world for a little bit. And having all these colonies go their separate ways within the first couple of years after World War II is not a way to stabilize the region. So they're going to give all the colonies back to the Allied powers now. To the Allied powers. Germany is not going to get their colonies back. But the problem is that Ho Chi Minh said it's free. We're saying it's not. France tries to reestablish its rule from 46 to 54. The end, there's going to be this battle of Dien Bien Phu, in which the French forces are in the middle of this valley, and they said, oh yeah, we're fine. The only thing that could bother us is if they get cannons on that mountain, and they can't do that. There's so much jungle. Next morning they wake up, there's cannons on that mountain. So it's problematic for them. They have to retreat. There's a peace treaty that is decided on. Issue for us is that Ho Chi Minh has embraced communism. Communism has spread from Russia, now in China, and from China into Vietnam. China is really going to be Vietnam's ally during this war. It's not necessarily the Soviet Union. But because communism is starting to spread into Vietnam, we're very concerned and we don't want it to take over. So we have a heavy hand in the peace treaty. The peace treaty of the Treaty of Geneva is essentially going to split it into a North Vietnam and a South Vietnam. Communist North, democratic capitalist, in real aspects a dictatorial South. But it's a pro-American strongman who's going to be in the South, so we're going to support him. The leaders, this is Ho Chi Minh, which we've mentioned many times already. The Ngo Dinh Diem is going to be the South Vietnamese leader. We like him because he's been to America, he studied in America, he went to college in America, he speaks English, he's Catholic, he seems very Western. The only issue for us is he is only going to look out for those people that are like him. So if you have had a Western education, if you spoke English, if you were very European in your ways, if you're a Catholic, Diem is like the best guy in the world. But if you're a Buddhist, like a majority of Vietnamese are, he's going to be very repressive to you. And this is going to boil over because if people don't like Diem in the South, they're going to be much easier to persuade over to the communist side and start following Ho Chi Minh. most of the Vietnam War is not going to be fighting the North Vietnamese. Most of the army of the North Vietnamese is going to stay in North Vietnam. Now they're supporting the war, but they are staying in North Vietnam. The people who are actually doing most of the fighting are going to be South Vietnamese communist guerrillas who are upset with Diem and want to spread communism into South Vietnam. That's who we're really fighting. So Diem, we know he's repressive, and this is the picture that really gets it, the self-immolation of Buddhist monks. Self-immolation is setting yourself on fire. So these monks come out into the middle of the streets of Saigon, pour gasoline on themselves, light a match, light themselves on fire, and stand there or sit in the lotus position completely silent until they're burned up. There's got to be something wrong if people are willing to do that. So seeing this, now what's happened since 1954 is we have soldiers in Vietnam telling them how to prevent a communist takeover. We've got between 900 and 2,000. But in 1963, and this is all part of JFK, he doesn't want to spend that many troops in different places. He wants to have special force as part of that flexible response. We need to be ready to go any place in the world, so we need highly trained but small amounts of troops in those places. By 1963, that ain't going to fly anymore. Not when people are burning themselves up in the middle of the streets. So Dien's got to go. There are people who are planning an assassination. The CIA knows about the assassination, and they don't do anything about it. So Diem is assassinated so we can get a little less repressive person in power in South Vietnam and possibly stave off communist guerrilla forces. But also, without Diem there, we've got to take a much more heavy-handed role in the fighting. This isn't Vietnam's war anymore. This is our war to protect Vietnam. So JFK had sent advisors in. Most of these are going to be special operations guys, so Navy SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, Delta Force. They work well from the 50s to 63, but we're Americanizing this war. So after JFK is assassinated, Lyndon Johnson is the president now. And Lyndon Johnson is the guy who is going to ramp up our presence in Vietnam. So 64, we're going to have the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We have our patrol boats right off of the coast of North Vietnam and South Vietnam. One of them is going to be attacked by a North Vietnamese boat. And then 2 days later, I think it's 2 days later. Yeah, 2 days later, there's another one that's going to be attacked. Now, the Maddox was stopped, but the Turner Joy, there's a lot of questions of whether it actually was attacked or not, because they had a radar signature of an incoming missile, but they never got hit. With the USS Maddox, I believe it was one bullet hole in the ship. But this is enough for, and I gotta change some of this a little bit. I gotta make it so where you can actually read the writing, right? Congress sees this as enough of a violation for us to go fully into this war. Lyndon Johnson is asking for troop buildup, but he doesn't want to declare war. Again, with the Cold War, if we declare war, there's always a possibility that the Soviet Union comes in and we have World War III, and neither of us wants World War III. So he needs to have a little bit more space to fight a war in Vietnam without having a declaration. So Congress is going to issue the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. We'll take a look at it in class. Essentially what it's doing is giving him a blank check to fight a war in Vietnam without declaring a war in Vietnam. So the impact on our troop levels, the intensification, I'm just moving that around. Okay, so 1960 to 61, less than 1,000. Our Johnson takes over. 1968, we have more than 500. We have about 550,000 soldiers in South Vietnam. This is our war. We're fighting it now. We're going to either win or lose. So the tactics that we're going to be employing once we have all of our troops there. First thing to know is that it's a limited war. We can't do everything that we want to do. It's not a total war. Right? We know where the supplies are coming from. We know they're coming from North Vietnam. We'll bomb North Vietnam, but we will not invade North Vietnam. The reason for that, if we invade North Vietnam, it looks like we're trying to spread capitalism closer to China. And just like in Korea, where the Chinese felt endangered, they send their troops to invade North Korea and push us back, they could possibly do the same thing in Vietnam. We don't necessarily want to widen the war to China. Right, so we're not going to be able to invade. And the Soviets could be involved too, but China's going to get involved before the Soviets. But we can't bomb them. We will bomb North Vietnam pretty well. We'll we'll drop more bombs on North Vietnam than we did anywhere in World War II. All of World War II combined. Our General of Defense, our Secretary of Defense is a guy named McNamara, and our most well-known general is going to be William Westmoreland. M16 is going to be the main rifle. This is the first time we're seeing kind of those symbols of the American Army today. Helicopters are going to be big in Vietnam because it's a jungle terrain. We got to get our people from place to place. Helicopters are going to be the way. And the two kind of most well-known technologies of the war: napalm, which is jelly gasoline. We'll drop this on entire villages. It'll stick and it'll burn. And then Agent Orange, trying to kill off the jungle so we can see who we're shooting at. Tactics and weapons. So for North Vietnam, they've got to get the weapons from North Vietnam down here to the Viet Cong rebels, those communist rebels that are fighting the Americans and the South Vietnamese. They know they can't really go through South Vietnam because that'll be too easy. So what they actually do is they build a series of trails into other countries, Laos and Cambodia, and then they're going to supply the weapons from Laos and Cambodia. They do this because they know we can't legally extend the war into Laos and Cambodia and go after their trail. Now later in the war we'll secretly go and invade Cambodia and Laos, trying to cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's the reason why they're running into neighboring countries. The other thing is they have many tunnels. So they'll be in those tunnels waiting for our soldiers. And the big thing about us is we're going to try to protect our soldiers as much as we can. So if we're going into battle the next day, we're going to bomb the heebie-jeebies out of wherever we're going to. That sets up a problem for us because the Viet Cong are going to go into those tunnels and wait, and the only thing that the bombing's going to do is just tell them where we're going to be the next day. And there's also going to be plenty of booby traps we're going to have to deal with as well. Operation Rolling Thunder is going to be where we're going to bomb North Vietnam into oblivion, or at least try to. We're trying to help South Vietnamese morale. We're trying to stop the flow of support down to the Viet Cong rebels. We're going to have some of our soldiers that are going to be shot down. John McCain is one of those that are going to be shot down. He's going to be in a prisoner of war camp. Jane Fonda, who's a famous actress of the time, is going to go to North Vietnam and sit actually in a anti-aircraft gun and a photo op. And that's going to become very divisive back home. Now, 1968, the president, Lyndon Johnson, is saying we're winning this war. A couple months we'll be done with it, and then all of a sudden Tet. The Tet Offensive is going to be this massive attack by the Viet Cong all over South Vietnam. They call it a ceasefire for Tet, so South Vietnamese soldiers go home, leaving only American soldiers on the front lines. At that time, the Viet Cong were going to attack, and I have no idea why this map is flipped over. That's weird. But they're going to attack many different places at once, trying to capture any of those cities. Now, militarily, we crush the Viet Cong. More than 110,000 Viet Cong soldiers are going to be killed, wounded, or captured. But what does it do back home? It looks like we're losing this war. And people can't trust the president anymore because he said we were winning, then Tet Offensive happened. So we're starting to distrust. This war is going to start becoming less popular. Up to 1968, the Vietnam War is a pretty popular war. People don't necessarily question why we're there, and we're about to win. Now, after 68, it looks like we can't win this war. The guerrilla fighting is going to be too powerful. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to finish this up in just a couple minutes. We're almost to the end of the war.